Here we go. And everybody who's on here today and everyone who registered will get a copy of this, this recording. I want to start by welcoming you guys to LunchVox Live, possibly the last live version we have. Maybe we'll be in person next time. We do these events quarterly, bringing speakers of relevance to the business community to our fellow chamber members. And I really want to thank Chambers Construction for their support of this program, their sponsorship that lets us offer this free to members, these sessions. So I'm gonna kick it off here to Joy from Chambers Construction to share a couple words about their organization.
All right, well, thank you, Paige, and appreciate having the opportunity to speak today. It's a pleasure to be here. As Paige said, my name is Joy Pendowski. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development for Chambers Construction. So while you've been driving around town, you've probably seen our signs on various job sites. We currently have several projects that are under construction. For those who are not as familiar with who Chambers Construction is, we've been a commercial builder in our area for the past 66 years. Our team is committed to projects that make a difference and building what's important in people's lives. We've built a variety of structures and facilities, but we get most excited about projects that help our community thrive. Such is the case when we're looking at projects involving children. Not only do these venues bring us all together as we cheer for the home team, the tourism that's generated by these facilities lead to other new projects, such as expansions, second locations, renovations, etc., which add jobs and other economic gains for our area. Over the years, Chambers Construction has built a number of sports facilities, a few notable projects that you probably are familiar with, the Mashofsky Center near Autzen Stadium, the Morris Center at Bushnell University, and most recently, the new kids sports field house and turf field that stand where Civic Stadium once stood. So as we look forward, it's exciting to see that there are new sports venues that are on the horizon for our area, projects that are being discussed for along the riverfront, both Springfield and Eugene, which will help meet current demand for youth sports and city leagues and allow for some growth. Chambers Construction is actively engaged in these conversations, and we're providing support as needed with the planning. And something that's I personally appreciate, Chambers Construction also actively supports their employees who volunteer and give time to youth sports. So, and I personally appreciate that because I also happen to oversee 2 youth ice hockey programs, one that's local and one that's statewide. And in those roles, I organize multiple events that bring hockey teams to our area because yes, we have an ice rink here in our town. So I bring teams from across Oregon, from the Western states, and even down from Canada. And I've worked frequently with Joey Jewell, who's one of the speakers today. His work has made it really easy for visiting teams to book hotel stays, get information for what they want to see and do while they're here, creating a real tangible positive impact for local businesses and vendors. So it is tremendous that our local leaders, businesses, and sports organizations are working together and looking ahead for the future of sports tourism in our area. It's exciting, and Chambers Construction is proud to be involved with and supportive of these efforts. So thank you all. And on behalf of Chambers Construction, I hope you enjoy today's presentation.
Thank you, Joy, and really a big thank you to Chambers Construction and all the work that they do with our chamber. So as she mentioned, today's program is sports tourism and why it matters, and we thought that this was a particularly relevant topic to the business community, especially as we're coming out of hosting the Olympic trials here in Eugene and Springfield. The chamber was lucky enough to be able to host the hospitality courtyard downtown, and what a blast that was for the race walk. So really, really relevant. We've got 3 speakers here today joining us. Joey Jewell with Eugene Cascades and Coast. Joey's a senior director of Eugene Cascades and Coast Sports Commission. He spent the past 6 years advocating for local sports infrastructure and attracting high-end sports events to Lane County. He's worked on events such as the 2008 U.S. Masters National Swim Meet, the 2015 Pan American and Para-Pan Olympics American Games U.S. team processing, 2016 and 2021 U.S. Olympic Trials track and field, and is working on the World Athletic Championship for Oregon 22. We also have Liz Dahlager, who's the Vice President of Market Intelligence for Mereté Hotel Management. She has more than 20 years of experience in hospitality with major brands as well as independent boutique hotels. Liz has a long history of working with travel and tourism partners across the state in order to increase tourism dollars to local and regional economies. She is passionate about sustainable travel, preserving outdoor recreation for future generations, and the values tourism brings to a community. Liz currently serves on the Eugene Airport Advisory Committee, the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and she chairs the Springfield Chamber Economic Development Committee. We're also joined by Jase Newton. He's the Recreation Services Director for Willamalane Park and Recreation District. He graduated from U of O in 2010, and while attending college, worked for Willamalane Park and Rec in a variety of positions, including summer camps, after-school programming, and grounds maintenance. He went to work with PennMet Parks and later with the River Road Park District, eventually serving as their superintendent. And then in November of 2020, Jase crossed the river to begin working for Willamalane Park and Rec District again as the Recreation Services Director. So these three will be able to share their experiences working in the sports and hospitality and recreation kind of sectors, and talk a little bit about what the broader economic implications for the community and for the business community are, and give us a little bit of a sneak peek as to what ongoing projects we have in this area and what's in the future for us. So Joey, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Paige. I know that there's a few of you on this call who are pretty familiar with who we are and what we do, but I know there's also quite a few of you who aren't. So what we're gonna do is start you guys off with a little bit of a background on just what sports tourism is and how it kind of interacts within our community. I'll show you guys some numbers industry-wise, and then I'll bring in Liz and Jase there afterwards, and we'll get into what we've been doing this past year, what we've got coming up, and how sports tourism really kind of affects both Willamalane, the hotel industry, and everything, and kind of how we all bring that together for everybody on the call. It's one of those things where we don't always realize or we don't always see the direct implications, but sometimes the indirect stuff is what we get as well. And so definitely making sure we highlight all of this stuff. So to kind of begin on this one, usually when people hear about tourism, leisure tends to be what we all think about, right? It's I'm going on vacation, I'm going to drive, or I'm going to fly, we're going to go to a city, or we're going to go to Hawaii, or we're going to go wherever, and that's typically what we think of on this. The reality is that there's so many subsections within tourism, and sports is one of them. And sports is actually a big piece of tourism as a whole globally. And so for us, whenever we do sports tourism, it's mainly sports events, right? So it's whether you're coming to participate, whether it's let's say it's an adult softball tournament that you're going to be playing in, or you are coming to watch your kids play in a youth volleyball tournament, or you're coming to see the Ducks and you want to come and just be a spectator. Those are all things that culminate and fit within the bubble of what we call sports tourism. And the nice thing about this is that when people come and do these things, they stay in our community, they play in our community, and they spend money in our community. And what they're spending is essentially what we call new money. And so new money is, or every local destination, or everybody has their own economy, whether it's Springfield, whether it's Lane County, we create from our businesses part of this economic cycle. Let's say I am someone from Chicago. I might have my own entire different economy within the city of Chicago. I might have my paycheck, I spend and I make and I do all these different goods and services. Well, when I go on vacation, I take that money with me that was created in Chicago. Let's say I come here to Springfield, and then I spend that money here. That's all new money that's being introduced to our economy and working within that cog and that wheel of what happens. And it just kind of trickles down and it cycles through all the different areas of what we have here. And so there's a couple different ways that we specifically see this. Direct spending is one of the big ones. And so when we're talking about general sports tourism from a spectator capacity, we usually see it from hotel rooms, right? People typically pay for those, generating revenue for hotels and other lodging groups. People got to eat, so restaurants tend to see a lot of that revenue, retail sales, and then we have something called TRT, which is the transient room tax, which people tend to pay when they book a hotel room. And those taxes are then used for other services throughout the community. So raising money in all of those different areas are kind of the really neat thing and one facet of what we see on this. The other part is from what an event planner might actually spend, right? And so this is a little bit of the behind the scenes spending that we see, and that could be venue rental, that could be catering, permitting, local marketing, or even screen printing. You know, a lot of times when we go to these sports events, everybody sees t-shirts with logos or sweatshirts. And especially with the youth tournaments, that's the big thing. Everybody's got somebody on site. If they're not making it there, they've got a whole bunch of them lined up. And everybody wants some sort of t-shirt or sweatshirt that's got the year of the event so that they can remember this trip. Well, those are all things that an event planner pays for. And a lot of times they don't know exactly who those individuals or who those businesses are within the community. And that's where the Sports Commission steps in, is we act as that liaison to get everyone in touch with that planner to help stimulate and connect some of those business opportunities. Now, again, what I was saying here is, okay, we've got a lot of people on this call, and maybe I'm not a screen printer, maybe I don't own a restaurant or anything. Well, how else might I see some of these impacts? Well, I mean, one thing that we look for here too is, like you said, youth volleyball. Let's say the team goes out for a team dinner the night before the tournament. Well, if you think about it, that's roughly 15 kids per team, plus however many parents and coaches might be traveling with them. That tab tends to add up, right? And so you would hope that your server is going to get a pretty good tip on top of that too at 20%. That's money that, again, didn't originate in our local economy. That server may take back with them, and let's say they go buy a laptop because they're a student at the U of O. You know, how many people here think that maybe at Best Buy that they thought they were going to be selling all these laptops when the Olympic trials came through? Not very many, but that might be something that they see from a revenue standpoint a week or two later, because some of that new money has started to disperse itself within our community and our local economy, and we're starting to see it in a lot of different indirect ways. The other part that we have of this is kind of like an indirect benefit. That's not necessarily the direct spending. And so what we found is that sports tourism actually improves the quality of life for people within our community. And so we see this a lot with, Willamalane is a fantastic example of this. Like, yes, we book a lot of sports events at Willamalane, whether it's at the Les Schwab Sports Park or whether it's at the Bob Keeper Center, but it's also a community benefit. We have leagues, we have programs that our locals get access to those venues. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the potential for an indoor track, same thing. It's not necessarily just an indoor track project. It's a multi-purpose facility that everybody would have a chance to play on and use. And so those are opportunities where sports tourism goes hand in hand with community recreation and enjoyment and quality of life. What we also see is that as quality of life improves, increased property values follow in recreation communities, something we don't really think about a whole lot of. And then areas with recreation attract more residents with higher incomes and faster earnings growth than areas without. And then the neat thing about this too, and we love this from the Travel County and the Eugene Cascades and Coast side, is that sports events are also a marketing opportunity for our destination. And so what we found is that whenever we've had a sports event happen here, that roughly 60% of parents that are traveling for youth sports tend to come back and book a normal vacation in that destination. And then 74% of those people recommend that destination to others. So even though we're seeing these numbers as let's say it's a weekend event or a one-day event, what we're kind of also doing is we're showing off our community and our destination to all these people from outside the area that may have never thought about coming to see us, but when they're here, they're like, oh my gosh, like Main Street looks amazing, or we're so close to these waterfalls and stuff. I've got to come back and see everything because I really only booked my trip for this tournament. And so we see those repeat bookings and we see those repeat travel pieces. And that's another thing where it keeps adding up and it keeps generating more revenue for our communities, which is just another thing that highlights how important and how much this impacts everybody throughout. So even if you're not directly involved with the sports event industry, chances are you've been impacted by it in some form or another. Now, I will share a slide with you guys because I want to show you some numbers of what we've been doing. All right, so hopefully you guys can see this. So in 2019, I know we're in 2021 right now, but bear with me here. When we do industry report numbers, typically it takes a year or two for them to compile all the data to get it back. So right now, 2019 is the most recent industry data that we have. And it's obvious pre-pandemic, so that's also kind of a nice thing for us to keep in mind as we think about it. So a normal, healthy sports tourism industry, $45 billion spent on sports-related travel alone in calendar year 2019. That is massive, all right? And that's everything in the US. For the previous 5 years, the Sports Commission here, we've confirmed over 221 sports events that have generated roughly $159 million in estimated economic impact. And when we say what's EEI, Joey, or what's estimated economic impact, that's essentially the new money that I was talking about. So we have calculators and measurements to measure that stuff. So all of those events that we're talking about, that's over $150 million of new money that are added to our communities here. 231,000 hotel room nights and over 400,000 participants and spectators that have come to our community over the last 5 years. And this past fiscal year for us, so when we do our fiscal years, we don't really think about it in a calendar year. So for us, it's July 1st through June 30th. So again, height of the pandemic till now, right? We were able to confirm 40 sports events, can generate $32.4 million of new money, 35,000 hotel room nights, and 86,000 participants and spectators. Now, when you guys are hearing those numbers, some of you are going to think, wait a minute, Joe, we were shut down. What do you mean we had 40 different sports events and 35,000 hotel room nights and 80,000 people coming in here? Well, one thing to keep in mind with these numbers is that this isn't what happened during that time. Some of it is. Some of it we book on that annual basis. That's right there. It happens in that year, the same year that we book it. But a lot of this is for future years too. And so when we look at this, part of that 32.4 million, part of that is the NCAA championships, which we were awarded this past fiscal year for the next 4 years, right? Minus that 1 year that Austin, they're kind of giving it back to Austin because they missed it 1 year. We would have liked to have all of them, but they were trying to do them a solid. So we let them have it, good graces, but we're going to take the rest of those years, luckily. And when you think about that, with how much track impacts us in our community, those 4 years of track and field for just the NCAA championships account for $24 million of that 32 million. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's not the Olympic trials. That's not the World Athletics Championships, Oregon 22. That's not the Prefontaine Classic. That's just the NCAAs alone for 4 years. So when we talk about how important is sports tourism to us and how important is, let's say, track and field specifically, that's a major piece of what we have going for our community. And it's also a major piece for our identity here. I mean, just look at my background for my screen. We're Tracktown USA, right? So it's hard for us to imagine what life would be like without track and field. And another thing to keep in mind with this too is we don't count in our numbers Oregon football. And Oregon football would also make those numbers a lot higher, even though for a lot of last fiscal year, they didn't have any fans in the stands, but we still saw some economic impact as a result of it. So again, as we're trying to keep some of these numbers in perspective, I want to make sure that everybody just realizes like how much this community needs, not just track and field, but just the university and some of these mega events that we host. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring Liz and Jase kind of into the conversation here. And, what we were talking about, it was like, yeah, okay, that's great, Joey, right? That's 2019 and before, we're coming out of a pandemic right now. We know that we pretty much lost winter events because not a lot was able to happen indoors. We know that there were different gathering size limits and all of those things. So how does that really impact? What did we actually do this past year? We still hosted events for sure. And I'll start with you, Jase, on this one. I want to get your input, but give us an idea of what life was like for Willamalane when COVID hit and how you guys kind of ran with it and adapted.
Yeah, so obviously COVID put a big hamstring on everything across the entire world, essentially. But for Willamalane, The biggest challenges that we ran into were a lot of the things that came kind of through the March, April timeframe are indoor rentals, specifically like SEVA volleyball tournaments. And we weren't able to utilize facilities for those. Outdoor rentals, fortunately, were able to continue, but they had to do so in such limited capacities that we were really challenged on what we could actually offer. We were able to still offer to like third-party programming. If we had like the Portland Timbers utilize our facilities at Les Schwab for rentals to get kids out, but you could only have limits of 25 or 50 people, which means parents can't attend. You can't have games against others very often until we got further into the pandemic. So we really ran into challenges on those fronts. As we start to come out of it, things are starting to look a little bit more, we see the light at the end of the tunnel, I would say. The demand is obviously there across the board. We have, I think we'll get into challenges in a minute, but the people in the community, specifically on the Springfield and Eugene area, are asking and demanding for all of the space that we have. And it was a tough year to get through, but modifications that we made, specifically in the recreation programming portion, more so in like the virtual aspects of still being able to offer things. And then on the actual sports tourism side, with events now starting to come back and planning for this upcoming fall, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
And the nice thing too is, I mean, with Willamalane, obviously, you know, it's not just the Les Schwab Sports Park and it's not just Bob Kiefer, right? And so one of the things that we saw last summer when we couldn't do a whole lot indoors and we were limited, obviously, with how many people or what activities people could do, baseball and softball was huge for us because it was one of those sports that naturally is socially distanced, right? And we worked with the Oregon Health Authority and we worked with Willamalane and a lot of other groups to make sure that we had a set of guidelines that they could use that would keep everybody safe and still operate. And that was one of the things our office was very proud of, is that every single event that we worked with, there was not one single instance of infection from COVID-19. And a lot of that went down to communication with Willamalane, a lot of it went down to communication with us and the state, and just making sure we really followed those guidelines. And like I said, we're incredibly proud of having that track record here within this community. And so, you know, Liz, I want to go to you with this now, because like we said, we didn't just shut down, we still had some things coming in. So I kind of want to get the hotel perspective on kind of like what you guys also went through, what you saw, what you didn't see, and how you adapted.
Sure. So thank you, Joey. Yeah, I mean, obviously events still happened. They were much more minimal. I would say from a hotel perspective, the challenges that we faced, you know, outside of complete travel halts was that groups, right? Youth sporting teams, groups, parents, needed really flexible cancellation policies. We got a lot of last minute requests. Yeah, Jase is nodding. Yeah. So you'd be like, oh, the week of, oh, by the way, we're bringing a team of 40. So, you know, there's our working hours from a sales and marketing perspective became much different, and just how things were booked or reserved into properties were much different. From an operational perspective, obviously, COVID presents some hotel operational challenges, right, with keeping guests safe and healthy. And so following those brand guidelines, as well as the CDC guidelines and the state requirements and OSHA requirements, all of those things, which if some of you have seen the videos that, correct me if I'm wrong, Joey, but I think Eugene, Cascades and Coast put out with our Hyatt Place, that, you know, you saw the shields come up at the front desk, and you saw hand sanitizer stations, and you saw keyless room entry, right? People using their phones, so that eliminating any contact. So rolling all of those operational procedures out quickly and effectively, following all of the guidelines that I will note changed, if not daily, at least weekly. And so staying on top of that, you know, is challenging for hoteliers when they're faced with trying to serve the guests that are traveling. So on top of, I guess, the last minute nature of that, just taking care of the people that, you know, were required to travel during that time period. was also pretty challenging. I think as a group effort, as far as the community goes, I think we did a good job of taking care of those events and making sure, again, like I'll just reemphasize what Joey said, because it's no small feat to do those events and keep people safe and healthy and happy, I guess, so that they come back post-COVID. Yeah.
And Joey, if I can add real quick, just as a follow-up to that, just some of the changes that we were required to make and how they impacted regular programming also modified how we're able to move forward with future programming. So like a good example for us is like Willamalane Park Swim Center had to close down 3 times at different parts throughout the pandemic. When we finally came back, we had to do a reservation system, but the capacities allowed for us to increase our reservation numbers. So our front desk staff, who we usually have 2 of at the swim center, we're now doing 1,300 registrations a day, 6 days a week to try to accommodate people in the facilities. So just the mental impact that it had on people, not just the financial side of things, was huge throughout this. And it's really also allowed us to restructure how we provide things going forward and saying, what can we do and what can't we do? And how can we best accommodate to draw in these larger groups in the future? Because we found ways now that are alternative options to what we had prior. So it's really, in a way, given us an opportunity to look at how we do things and what we're able to offer. And that has been one positive that has come out of the pandemic, is the different perspectives that you're getting. So,
and one thing I do want to point out is both of you guys, I mean, essentially you were accomplishing all of these things with limited staff. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yes.
Oh, yeah.
I'll comment quickly that from, again, a sales perspective, which really from a sports tourism, right? We have sales staff that work closely with Joey and his team and with Willamalane or the U of O or whoever the venue is. We initially laid off all sales staff middle of March, towards the end of March. And we ended up bringing, because of sports tourism, ended up bringing back 1 full-time person pretty quickly. And then 2, currently we're at 50% staffing, a year in, and looking to add to that team again, just due to the amount of demand that Jase, I think, mentioned that we're seeing now. But even over the past year, we had 2 full-time people because of the amount of work specifically around track and field that's required from a hotel perspective. And then operationally, yeah, staffing was and continues to be a huge challenge, as everyone who, if you watch the news, you hear about hospitality, hotels and restaurant staffing, as well as under other industries at this point. I think we're all feeling that crunch, but we definitely had some challenges, yeah, with staffing as far as meeting the needs, especially like I mentioned. I think the biggest thing that I would point out that people may not realize is just how last minute some of the business was that occurred over the 12-month time period that we can say was during the pandemic.
Yeah, I would say the staffing challenges that are coming up are, they just continue to be ongoing. That's our biggest challenge through the district, is just trying to get the bodies to be able to provide the services that we need. Lifeguards are a great example. We started at March of last year, we had 65. Coming back from the pandemic, there were 23, which isn't enough to run 1 facility, let alone 2. Typically in the summer, we run about 115, and I think we finally hit 55 now. So it's just tough to get back up where we were previously. The one side of it that I will say is positive is on our rentals team. We were able to get some bodies in there from the coordinator level perspective to provide, and we have more demand right now than we can actually accommodate for, just because we can't get people to cover some of the weekend events. Or else we have our full-time staff running 7 days a week at 10 or 12 hours a day. So it becomes very demanding. But if that, I wrote down as our biggest challenge right now, it would be just finding staff to be able to provide everything that's being asked. which is, it's a good thing to have that demand. It's just a tough situation to go through.
Yeah, when we need that demand, right? We need to have the supply and the ability to host it, which is, that's part of our challenge of coming out of this pandemic, is making sure that we're prepared and we have everything we need to keep booking that business and keep it going and keep that money coming in. You also mentioned something, Jase, that I want to touch on a little bit more, is you talk about like the mentality of people coming in and how this infected people. And I was getting calls all during that pandemic from coaches and planners just saying, like, our kids need to play. Like, we need to do all this stuff. How can the sports community help make this stuff happen? And, we're constantly moving on shifting guidelines and stuff change. Like you said, if it wasn't weekly, it was daily that it was changing, right? And then we had the wildfires, and that canceled a couple of baseball tournaments for us as well. But we saw our sports venues and facilities step up and really host some of those like donations and supply drops and volunteers. And with the hotels still, you guys were impacted by it as well, which also impacted, future events and what could be hosted, right, Liz? Yeah. And so the piece of what we had here, and luckily, as we've seen this stuff continue, we've been seeing a pattern really about business just in general, right? And so we typically have our busy seasons, we typically have our slow seasons. Liz, hopefully you can kind of touch on this and give us a big overall scope, but what does that trend typically look like for us in the given year?
Sure. So, the Eugene Springfield market follows a pretty typical seasonality from a hotel perspective, with peak season really being from Memorial Day to Labor Day. We get an additional boost from U of O football weekends, obviously in the fall. But as far as a 7-day-a-week kind of peak time period, that summer time period remains pretty strong. June, as most of you who have lived here a long time know, is dominated by track and field events and the U of O graduation. That pretty much takes care of that month. And then you go into peak summer travel. And Eugene's an ideal destination, as Joey and his colleagues will remind you. Eugene Springfield on the I-5, right, between Canada and California. So for leisure travelers that are just drive market. So we have a pretty solid kind of peak season that occurs then. So our need times, or what we refer to in the industry as need time, is really that October to April time period, where we're really looking for events that can fall into that time frame, because you don't have that additional drive market leisure traveler. And then the track and field, there we go, events that typically happen in June, and even Prefontaine and Marathon that happen in April, May aren't quite enough to get there. So October through April are really the focus as far as need period. We're always looking for events or a way to cause compression in the market during those time periods. And that's probably, you'll see the conventions at Valley River Inn and what's now the Graduate tend to book during those time periods, right? Because rates are a little lower, and that's a need time period for them. So when we get those big conventions in, that's where you might see that compression, and that affects everyone, right? So we start to feel that, and you get higher rates in Springfield hotels at that time. So that's really the need period that we're looking at. And so how this ties to sports tourism, right, is we're, strategically, it would be ideal to have more sports tourism in the off season and not put more in June and July, where we're pretty much running 100% occupancies at pretty high rates. And I'm not just speaking for our hotels, I'm speaking kind of for the market generally when I refer to those high occupancies. And so when we think about sports tourism in the off season, and we look at some of the options that many of you are aware of that are kind of out there, that's why that indoor track, I think, pops up often. It does give us an alternative when the weather's not great to capture those events during a time where our hotels are definitely needing that overnight business that's not going to come from that typical summer leisure traveler. I think I covered it, Joey, but if I didn't, feel free to.
No, you did. It's perfect. I mean, we have this basically this trough. I mean, if you're looking at a graph, it's a bell curve, All right, the vast majority of our business from a tourism standpoint tends to be in the summer, and then it drops off through the winter. And I can't speak for everybody necessarily on this call, but I know I've had conversations with local businesses who tell me that, yeah, those summer months tend to be their best months, and they ride that wave as best they can to get through the winter. And what we saw this too is, especially with the pandemic on there, when track and field didn't happen in the spring, it was interesting to me when I was talking to a few businesses, because they're saying, man, like we're having a bad month or 2 months, 3 months. Like we normally gear up at this time, and we make all this money, but for some reason the money's not here. And I kind of chuckled to myself and I went, you realize that's because track hasn't been happening, right? And they were like, what? And I was like, well, yeah, when you're in the service industry and those are people who come in for these events and they're spending money at your place of work, and you guys benefit off of that. I go, when that stuff's not here, this is what you get. And they kind of went, oh, like it never thought about that and how that impact kind of relayed to them on that level. In the same case with you, Jase, it works the same way from a facility standpoint too. I mean, we have our economy and how it typically works on here, but with sports tourism, we can kind of pick and place different areas. We can stimulate it based on what time of the year we have those down fronts. And from a facility standpoint, it's similar. I kind of want to get your opinion on this too and see how it works from the rental side and what your availability looks like during that time also.
Yeah, I mean, the Bob Kiefer Center is our prime example. We've got the 3 multi-purpose courts and 3 wood floors. And from essentially the December through March timeframe, every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, SIVA Volleyball uses those for anywhere between 12 and 24 volleyball courts. Pretty much every month or every weekend. And the weekends that aren't filled, NAG often has the gymnastics programs going. We also have other requests and demand for just basketball tournaments coming in, those kind of things. We just don't have the space to currently allocate for them. And it also would impact, just from Willamalane's perspective, our regular programming too, because if something like an indoor track were to be developed, it provides another opportunity for the community to use a large space, and then we can use the Bob Kiefer Center for regular programming that we currently can't offer on some of those weekends just due to high demand of rentals. So it really is something along those lines would be a really big draw for the community. And I think the demand, at least from our perspective on the rental side, has sure been there.
Yeah, the demand is really high, right? The supply for as far as available courts and indoor spaces is very low. And like I was saying earlier, these are things where you build one, whether it's for community benefit or for the economic benefit. But with sports tourism, the nice thing is it's both. So let's say we were to build some other sort of facility. We're name dropping the track here all the time. Could be anything really if we think about it. But that frees up space for community use that we know we have more demand than supply for. But it also frees up, like you were saying, that programming, that rental space for us in my office to book those further events to help drive more money, more economy boosting events during those times of need. And that's massively huge. And for us, like I said, Jase, you've got some numbers on just like youth participation stuff and like obesity rates. And again, we're supposed to be talking about like the economic side of all of this, but you can't really have that conversation without having that conversation of how do you keep it going in the future either, right? Because if people stop playing and they stop doing these things, then kids aren't going to be traveling and they're not going to be playing. And then this industry essentially kind of falls flat on it. So what have you guys found from like youth obesity rates and just athletic participation trends?
Yeah, just kind of give numbers too. Like Willamalane, just in youth programming for like sports activities, it's somewhere between like 300,000 and 400,000 per year in the spaces that we have. Outdoor spaces, if we had more field space in particular, we have the demand there that we just don't have space to plug them in. We have a good partnership with Team Springfield and Springfield Public Schools, but they utilize some of the space facilities also. And so just trying to accommodate everybody, it gets into a crunch. And if we had the space available, I think we'd be able to fill it a lot more. Just keeping kids involved, as you guys probably know, you've probably heard one of us say it, but our mission statement is just to enrich the lives of everyone we serve. And youth is a big part of that. We try to offer as many diverse programs that we can. The obesity side of things has come much more prevalent in the last few years. The active youth, just a couple of like really good facts that you guys should know. They're 6 times more likely to become active adults. So when you start them young, they'll continue that trend as they get older. Obesity rates in kids in the United States between all genders, it's between 35 and 40%, which is a huge increase. The next closest, I think, was Italy, and they're around 30%. But that has gone up tremendously over the last probably 30 to 40 years. And all participants that join in these youth programs are 1/10 as likely to become obese as they get older. So the impact is there and the demand is there. We just got to keep finding ways to be able to provide it to all of the kids that want to participate.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If we don't have the spaces for them, then they can't be active. And then, like you said, the tourism side of it and the industry pieces, the business outside of just the health benefits of it, we start to see a lot of that slide and potentially this go away. And we really want to make sure that, one, kids are having the opportunity to be active for health, but 2, so that when they get to our portion of the industry, we can still keep the economy going. And we can still do that stuff. Because what we found is that sports tourism tends to lead communities out of recessions. It was interesting. We saw this back after 9/11 when we hit that main economic recession. Well, it was sports tourism that was bringing cities back and keeping them from going bankrupt. And we saw a lot of investment going into those groups back then. We saw it again in 2009 when the housing bubble burst and we saw the recession there. Then we started seeing more communities investing even more into their sports tourism and those opportunities and facilities and venues and other programs and initiatives. And now we're expecting the same thing with COVID. Like we said, a lot of industries got hurt real bad, or they just totally kind of shut down for a while there. We still had the ability to keep going to some extent and keep our communities thriving, to get through some of that parts. The winter was tough, but we're hoping that now, we're seeing a lot of sports events come back. As Joy can attest to here, we love the hockey tournaments, and we're just dying to get the hockey tournaments back this winter. And so those things are really important for us, and we want to make sure that we still have the ability to keep driving this industry forward and keeping money essentially in everybody's pockets that's on this call. I mean, that's really kind of a big piece of what we're trying to do, making sure that their businesses are strong, their employees are happy, and that everybody's kind of benefiting and succeeding from this. And so luckily, like I said, it's not all doom and gloom. We're talking about, we need more facilities, we need all this other stuff. Like, we don't have anything. There's a lot of conversations happening right now for new projects. And so it's not like it's not being addressed or we're not having those conversations, which is really nice. So I kind of want to hit on a couple of those and kind of update the group here with what's actually happening. And so we'll actually start with the indoor track. So Jase, I'll let you hit that one, and then I'll kind of touch on some of the other projects that we're seeing in the Springfield area.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joey. Just kind of a real high level for everyone. The process has been about 10 years in the making already, just in conversations. In 2019, there was an official analysis that was kind of provided to see what the economic impact might be, what the facility may look like, comparables around the country that would kind of, I guess, justify the need and the cause for it. The use of the facility, Joey mentioned this earlier, it's not just a track, which I think would be a really cool selling feature in itself, but you can use it for volleyball, wrestling, basketball tournaments, small concerts. It could provide a wide variety of options. And I think I can tell you this for sure, if the facility was built within our district, you'd better believe we'd want to be involved in helping manage it in some way or another. We seem to do, I feel pretty confident in our skills from what we've come through in the pandemic, that we can handle just about anything. So I would very much look forward to being involved in that. Just real high level numbers, the total estimated cost in the analysis was somewhere between the $40 and $60 million mark. But estimates over a 20-year period showed that the economic impact could be upwards of 249 million. It breaks it out by a 5-year, 10-year, 20-year scope. All of the information on it is found at springfieldhouseoftrack.com. Really good information on there, and it's a continuing, ongoing project that I look forward to hearing what comes from. So,
yeah, and I know there's been, Jase, there's a little bit of a range too of what they kind of expect, possibly what that EEI could be on an annual basis, and I want to say it's anywhere between 30 and 60 million a year. Is that roughly correct?
I believe so. It starts. Let me make sure. I've got the screen up here. 5 years, it projects out at 47 million over the first 5 years. At the 10-year mark, it goes to 109 and then up to 249. So by the 20-year mark, they were anticipating around 25 million to 30 million per year.
And that's, when we think about it, again, once it's multi-use there, so we would be doing anything from local tournaments and events to local usage, just period. Statewide tournaments that we could fit in there, potentially, and other regional tournaments that we can put. And that doesn't even count the track stuff. I mean, when we talk about the Olympic trials, that's roughly 37 million just for that one event. As we look at some of the indoor track meets that we could potentially host, as thank you to Tracktown USA, the organization. They're the ones who really drive the bus on a lot of this track stuff. And without them, we wouldn't have a lot of this stuff, to be honest. And so them being able to have one more venue to put some world-class type of events in that generate 30, 40, however many $1 million for 1 week, basically, just gives us that opportunity to keep rolling that through and really drive home that impact too. I also kind of want to talk about the Hamlin baseball fields. If you guys haven't seen those, as you've kind of driven down the highway and you've seen the construction going on there, really, really neat opportunity there. 2 baseball fields are going to get put in. I know we have the Drifters, I believe, are going to be a partial use of that, but also Bushnell University wants to use those fields as well. The funny thing about this is people tend to think about, okay, well, we've got a field, right? We can do a whole bunch of stuff. And the reality is no. Like, one field doesn't do us any good, right? Like, we need anywhere between 4 to 12 soccer fields, or there's some communities like Indianapolis has 26 soccer fields in one location. The more stuff you have, the larger events you can do. With baseball, you typically don't need, like I said, you don't need 26 fields in baseball to make an impact, but you typically need a minimum of 2 to start that conversation. And so with us, that's a really neat opportunity for us in Springfield to start really going after some of the baseball stuff, that whether it's, OSAA state competitions, whether they're regional club or select competitions, those are things that people travel all across the country for, and we'll have an opportunity to do that. Bushnell's games are obviously going to be driving fans and spectators in there as well. So it's just naturally going to be a tourism driving function for us in this community as well. The other project is really the Lane United and the Eugene Generals joint project that they're talking about right now. If you go onto their website, I believe in some of their social media, they've done renderings for what they want to do there. Essentially, the Lane United is trying to move up within the USL divisional ranks, which means they get closer and closer to a more professional level with more fans coming in. And they need a minimum number of seating to do that, which is roughly around 25 to 3,500. So they're looking at an outdoor stadium potentially on the river with an office park and a hotel built on site. And in addition to that, with part of the partnership with the Generals, 2 ice rinks. And again, kind of the same thing with baseball. We kind of need 2 sheets of ice in order to really up some of the tournaments and the events that we have. And Joy's shaking her head right now. We have 1 sheet in Eugene right now, which is great. It's a little bit different dimensions, right? It's not USA hockey dimensions, nor is it international hockey, NHL dimensions. And so being able to have 2 sheets there that are sanctioned dimensions, the right sizes, it's an incredible opportunity for us to really get 2 sports growing and generating more economic impact with this. And what we've seen too is hockey is one of those sports that is really popular in Oregon, but it's like low-key popular in Oregon. A lot of people don't understand like the participation numbers and how large it is. And now that we have the Seattle Kraken coming on, we're seeing even more interest in the sport starting to develop and come out of the woodworks. Like they're there, they're just starting to peek their heads up a little bit more. So when we can provide those opportunities, like we would go, full circle, as we're able to provide opportunities for kids to play, for adults to recreate and have these sports events come in and drive people here, it's a positive across the board for everyone, not just on the economic side. And that's something that I really, really want to drive home with everybody with this stuff. None of these venues right now are for sure confirmed. They're all still being talked about. They're all still in the planning stages. Depending on what side of the fence you are, I'm sure there's still opportunities for comment and still more things to come on that. But from a sports commission's perspective, obviously we like every facility. We want to have as many facilities as possible. So for us, these are projects that we would love to see get done and get confirmed. But at least, like you said, I want to make sure that everybody on this call is at least up to date with a lot of this stuff. And there's more information, there's more details on some of these projects that you can find on those individual websites for those organizations if you want to dig a little bit deeper and learn a little bit more. And then, the last part of this conversation, I'll try to go quick here, is just some of the big events that we have coming up. So again, we talk about track and field and how much that means to us and what are these really big opportunities that are going to be hopefully coming in the future. Real quick, we have the National Scholastic Athletic Foundation, which is the high school outdoor championships. And we hosted those this year in 2021 for the first time ever. Tracktown USA bid on 8 full years of it. They only gave us the first year. They haven't announced the other years. I know Uncle Phil made a very public announcement that we got it, but we have not heard official announcement yet, one way or another, whether we'll get the next 7. So we're pretty confident, but nothing confirmed yet. But again, 4,000 to 5,000-ish people per year for the next 8 years would be amazing for us. We have the Wanda Diamond League Championship, which is a partnership with the Prefontaine Classic that will be coming up as well. Another high-end, just very prestigious event that we're going to be able to host here, and everyone's going to be able to reap the benefits of. We talked about the NCAA Track and Field Championships, which luckily we're going to keep coming on strong here. And then obviously the elephant in the room is the World Athletics Championships Oregon 22, right? Not just the event, but we have training camps that are also possibilities where some of these federations will be coming in a week or 2 early so that they can train and get acclimated to our area before they officially start competing, which again, that's 2 more weeks of hotel room nights, right, Liz? That's more business for us. They're going to be when they come with their entourage, they're going to want massage therapists if they don't bring their own. They're going to want therapeutic hot tubs. They're going to want all sorts of stuff to keep their athletes in the best shape possible. So those are all opportunities for local businesses that we have here, not to mention catering, not to mention food and beverage. And so that's an extra piece for us where we look at it and we say, hey, if we can get a couple extra weeks, that's a bonus for us. We will absolutely take it. We have the community projects and efforts. I know Andy's part of the group right now, and Springfield has been really active at this point as far as local businesses being able to show their support of the event, whether it's through window clings and stickers and other pieces to be involved in it as well. I know our office is putting together a list right now of open spaces that businesses may have that they're able to rent out for this opportunity for different types of ancillary events and offsite events. So if you guys have some of those, definitely reach out to myself or Andy Babora, and we'll definitely get you on there and make sure that we can start driving some opportunities for you as they start to come alive. And then very last piece I want to hit home is there's a reason that Oregon 22 is not called Eugene 22, right? That a lot of people ask me, why isn't it Eugene 22? And the reason for that is that it was a state bid for this event because Eugene alone cannot handle everything necessary for this, right? And usually they can't with track and field. Springfield is very, very much important in everything that's going on with that sport. But for this one, it was funny. I was telling Jase this the other day. We have roughly 4,000 hotel rooms within the Eugene Springfield area. Oregon 22 needs 4,000 hotel rooms just for staff and media and the athletes alone. That doesn't take into account any of the spectators that are going to be coming in from all over the world. So we know Salem is going to be getting hotel rooms. We know Corvallis, we know Portland, we know Bend. It is definitely a statewide event that we are going to be hosting. When it's the first time it's ever hosted in the United States, and it usually fills up stadiums of 100,000 across the world, whether it's Tokyo or Paris or Amsterdam. And we get it here at Hayward Field. And we're going to be packing everybody in. We're going to pack probably as many seats as we possibly can. We'll probably be in that 30,000-ish range. So we know demand is going to be high and people are going to want to come out here, and it's going to be really exciting. And so, you know, just making sure everybody knows the scope of what's actually happening next year in the summer, and just be prepared, because the opportunities from an economic standpoint are massive. And if you're not already thinking about what you're going to be doing there, you need to start thinking about it, whether, like I said, it's working with the chamber, whether it's working with our offices. There's usually something going on right now to make sure that you guys can maximize the opportunity, essentially, from sports tourism and what we're doing here. And so with that, I want to end it, our portion of it at least, and open it up to Q&A. And thank you guys, obviously, for listening to all three of us talk during your lunch hour. I know I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joey and Liz and Jase. Just a reminder to everyone to put your questions in the chat if you have them, and I will call on you to ask your question as they come in. I also just want to point out that we do have Jamie Christopher here on the call. He's the general manager for the Drifters. And if you did have any specific questions about that project, I bet he could answer them for you. And Bonnie also posted a link in the chat to their website. So I would encourage you to check it out. But we'll start off, Jeff Nelson, you had the first question.
Oh, thanks. I just wrote mine out. I don't know if I need to read it out loud or if people have read it and want to answer it. Thank you.
I'll comment quickly, Jeff. I mean, I didn't see Courtney jump on the call, but I think in regards to sports tourism, kind of what Joey said is we're for all of it because it benefits us via room nights. But I think your question regarding, you know, development and kind of strategic thought behind that, I think we're lucky to have some really, really strong city representatives, community representatives, development representatives at the table, looking at all of these projects and having those conversations that you alluded to, which is, you know, best use, right? Either of land or current structures. So I think from my perspective, from a tourism and hotelier, I like everything for the most part, because I like things that generate room nights for our business model. And as a community member, you know, I'm definitely supportive of that economic development, but making sure that it's strategic and makes sense in the long term. And I think what I would just say is we have really good people involved kind of across the board for all of these projects. And so I'm confident that wherever they all land, that they will be well thought out and planned. And then Joey, maybe he can comment on the county's involvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as far as the county, what I can comment about is the overall general kind of philosophy behind some of this stuff, right? Because you do bring up a very valid point. And what I would say is that for some facilities, not all of them, sometimes the cost for renovation or adjustment can be higher than demolition and the building of something brand new. So that's something that, you know, sometimes gets taken into consideration. I mean, we look at Wrigley Field as an example, or sorry, not Wrigley Field, Soldier Field. You know, it's more expensive for Soldier Field to be renovated or torn down and built up. So they're actually looking at building that new football stadium in the suburbs, and they're looking at building brand new. So cost has a little bit something to do with that as well, as far as, you know, what we're doing with our existing facilities and future facilities. But what I would speak to on a larger scale piece of this is just the economic benefits, right? We invest in things that could potentially lead us to larger investments in the future. And if investing in sports tourism is a way to generate more resources for us to invest in other things in the community, like we talked about the transient room tax and some of those pieces there, whether it's a TID or something else, those are things that could potentially be options for us that are more not reasonable, but they're more attainable as a result of doing some of these things. And it's, like I said, it's a philosophy thing. So depending on which way you want to go, as a sports person, you know, that's typically the way I tend to see it.
Okay, we've got a couple of informational posts in the chat. Jase, I'm going to ask you if you can comment on the 800-meter running trail that's going in at Willamalane Park and what that partnership looks like.
Yeah, just a brief update on that. It's it'll just be an outdoor community use track. It was fundraised money. There's quite a few organizations that are involved in it, but there was about 50,000 that was fundraised to put in an outdoor track facility, and it's just essentially on the north end of the Willamalane Park. It'll be a large loop that goes around through kind of the trail and valley that exists there now. So really looking forward to that. Construction on it is, I'd have to check with our park side. It's either started or just getting set to start, but they were anticipating a fall opening for that. So that'll be, and we'll do a kickoff launch for that. I was trying to remember, sorry, off the top of my head, I can't remember the individual's name that it's going to be named after, but she had passed away, and so her family did some fundraising on behalf of them. So that's what it'll be in regards to. But it should be hopefully completed in the next, I would say, 3 months or so.
Jamie, do you want to give us a kind of a quick update on what the status of the Drifters fields are and what that partnership with Bushnell looks like?
Absolutely. So it started a while ago as the Springfield Baseball Project, a partnership between Huddle Up Foundation, which built the Maple Elementary softball baseball facility track, Bushnell, the Drifters, and the Springfield Public Schools. And we're going full force ahead. We have the rock out there for the foundation for the turf field we're building, I should say. We're expanding the facilities out there, building an entire stadium around that field. We're going to put some work into the other field as well, since the Millers will be playing more of their games there. They'll be using the Bushnell/Drifters field too, when Bushnell isn't using the field. They're the tier 1 users during their fall and spring season. We'll occupy the stadium June through August. We'll have teams coming into town that will need rooms for the teams and the players, their families, the coaches. We'll be partnering hopefully with some physical trainers in town. We need to have trainers on staff and in the facility. We're going to have to house our team, 25 kids in town with hopefully host families. So we're full steam ahead. We're excited to get started. If you hadn't had a chance to look at West Coast League teams, go to the West Coast League website. You can see the Corvallis Knights are the closest team up in Corvallis, and they've had two of the top three picks in the draft in 2019. We had 40 players drafted in the MLB last year, and it's a collegiate league, so it's not competing with the Emeralds in that they're a professional league, single A, but we have essentially collegiate all-stars coming into play in the Springfield, Eugene area during the summer. It's really exciting. Looking forward to it. And if you have any questions, I left my phone number and my email address. Feel free to reach out.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions? You can just feel free to unmute yourself and ask if you've got them. Okay, I'm gonna close us out by just offering Joey, Liz, and Jase an opportunity for kind of some final remarks here.
Yeah, I really will just use my opportunity here to do two things. First off is Andy posted in the chat bar, if anybody's interested in signing up for our Sports Commission newsletter, feel free to do so. That's going to be the best opportunity to see updates as we get them for some of these sports facilities projects as they continue through. It's going to be updates on advocacy efforts, whether it's coming down from the state, whether it's the county, or whether it's individual communities and cities, as well as other types of sports news that's happening within the community that relates to the tourism piece here. And so I highly recommend it. If you're not already on it, please sign up. It's a great way to just stay informed of what's going on within the community. And then the second thing, I do want to give Joy a little bit of a shout out here too. She posted a really good piece in the comments section. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, please do so, because she's 100% spot on with hockey in the Pacific Northwest and what that could mean for Springfield if that project is pushed through the way that they're hoping for it to be pushed through.
Thank you. It's amazing the number of events that I'm involved with the planning of that are regional events, like from like the 5 Western states, where we're selecting locations to have various events hosted that are high-level USA hockey events. And just having that second sheet would be huge. As is right now, I'm organizing a statewide girls team where we're part of the Western Girls Hockey League. So we'll be playing teams from Wyoming and Montana and Idaho and Colorado. And I'm working right now to bring all of those teams here to Eugene.
And 2 sheets gives us an opportunity to bid on national events. Whether, like you said, whether it's hockey, whether it's figure skating, it could be curling even. I know everybody loves curling when the Winter Olympics comes around. That's definitely an opportunity too.
Liz, you have any closing comments?
Yeah, so I will say 2 comments. I have one, what I'll call a go back, is just in regards to the ability for sports tourism to drive out of a recession. Joey touched on that quickly, but I wanted to point out that that really is, it's a really accurate statement, and it's because corporations and government entities and, you know, the people that have conferences and corporate travel, those policies don't shift as quickly, right? So parents with kids who want to play sports, they can go this weekend. So and even the NCAA, I mean, they're ready, you know, they have 5 contingency plans, whether it's going to happen, it might happen in some way, right? They're on it. And so that's why sports tourism bounces back so quickly, is just they're able to move very, very fast. Part of that is because of the amount of money that's involved. And so just wanted to clarify that. But the second part I'll say really quickly, hopefully, is that just our partners in this area. So Traveling County and the Sports Commission, I do have the privilege of having hotels and working with hotels and other partners in other parts of the state and in Washington state. And I continually in those conversations use Traveling County as kind of the example, right? So they do housing very well, they communicate very well, they're very active and visible in the community and driving these events. That isn't normal in some of our smaller communities across the state. So I would just encourage you, if you haven't thanked them lately, thank them for their efforts, but all Hello? Okay. It said you muted me, Paige. Can I go over my time?
Sorry, my computer just glitched and everyone froze on mine.
Okay. I was like, oh no, I'm saying thank you. So just, I would remind everyone in the community that might not be, you know, living in this and, you know, every day, that it's not something we can take for granted. It's pretty impressive that we have, you know, 5 venue projects and that this is a topic that we're engaging on. And so just a reminder that it is unusual and awesome, and as a community we shouldn't take it for granted. So on that note, I'll just say thank you.
Yeah, and I can follow up with Liz and just say thank you to everyone too for the time today. The only thing that I would ask is much more short-term than long-term, and that's if you know any bodies, please send them our way. We can use as many as we can to help keep this programming going. So thank you very much, and appreciate the time.
Okay, well, I just want to thank all 3 of our speakers again, and Joey especially for helping set this program up with us. All these folks work really hard on bringing dollars into our community and really building up our economic resiliency here in Lane County. So appreciate the work that you do to serve our community. I hope to see a lot of you at some of our upcoming events. I know next Friday, we're gonna have a ribbon cutting for Oakmont Family Dental. They are moving to Springfield. They're expanding and opening in a new office here, so hope you can join us. We also have our Joint Chamber Golf Classic happening next month on August 20th, and it's going to be out at Pine Ridge, and it's going to be a fun, beautiful day with lots of cool activities at each hole. And if you have questions about signing up, either as a player or a sponsor, feel free to reach out to me. And our Leadership Eugene Springfield program is coming up here again. We've got applications that are still open. They're due August 2nd for the cohort that starts in October and ends in May. And that is a really great civic leadership development program. Could be great for you, could be great for someone on your team. I know we have some alumni here on the call. So if you've got questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me. You can also find it on our website as well. And then I do want to give a quick shout out to Aiden here, who's on the call. He's going to be interning with us over the next 2 weeks. So if you hear from him, he's going to be working with us. He's going to be going off to college here pretty soon, but we hope he comes back to the area because we do love to have our local workforce stay here. So thank you again all for coming today to this program and for being interested in the economic development of our area. And with that, I hope you guys have a great weekend.